Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto trained Hanabi under the moonlight and built a hidden harem of Kunoichi, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a fanfic. Naruto hopped from tree to tree, not with his feet, but with his space-time ninjutsu, if it could be called that. In actuality, it was an application of a special power that Naruto was recently working with. Naruto had hit the limits of chakra training. He found that his chakra levels stopped growing after a while and that he could not force any more power into his ninjutsu attacks. Initially, that had been fine, he simply decided to work on taijutsu. Eventually, he had hit a limit there. He then focused on genjutsu, weaponry, and even fuinjutsu. Again, each time, he hit a limit. Naruto supposed that most humans wouldn't hit those limits. But Naruto had the benefit of training 500 times faster than anyone else. 1 year would be 500 years. 2 would be 1,000 years. He had broken the limits of what was practically possible for humans and had hit the theoretical limits of human ability. As a result, he had even decided to pick up on medical ninjutsu and dabbled in trying to master different styles of fighting to increase his versatility, rather than power, but at that point, it was diminishing returns. If he wanted to become stronger, he would need to seek out a new power. And he did. Eventually, he found what he was looking for. Instead of using chakra, he would use spiritual, yin energy and physical, yang energy, the two components of chakra. Unlike chakra, which had a form, neither spiritual energy nor physical energy had a form. Thus, there would be no limit to what the body could hold. The only constraints would be what his mind was able to come up with. This teleportation technique was based on that theory. Naruto would rip a hole in space-time first with the imaginary powers of spiritual energy and then keep the hole open with the life-giving properties of physical energy. It had been extremely difficult to learn how to use spiritual and physical energies independently, but the rewards had been worth it. Naruto could feel himself growing stronger once again. He called it the shadow step. The only problem was that he had to have a yin-yang seal that opened up a hole in space-time at his destination. He had recently covered many different spots in Konoha with seals that forcibly separated chakra into spiritual energy and physical energy, but the seals took incredibly long to create. Seals generally operated with chakra, so he would have to spend hours to create one of the complex seals. He preferred manually opening a hole in the distance, but that required visualization of the area he was teleporting to. So he was practicing his technique while his own students were training with his shadow clone. He be damned if he let his training slow down because he had students. A good teacher had to set a good example for his or her students anyway. Suddenly, he was filled with memories of his students. That was his cue to go. He quickly leapt towards where his students were training, taking care not to reveal that he knew a teleportation technique. Well, it looks like all three of you are gaining the hang of it after a couple days, Naruto remarked as he arrived. All three of his students were hanging upside down from different tree branches. Naruto-sensei, look at me. I can hop from tree to tree like Tailman now. Hikari jumped from trunk to trunk of different trees. Takaru was doing the same thing except he was chasing Patamon, who was definitely flying with those strange ears of his. Ha! Daisuke shouted. The boy was standing upside down, clearly proud that he had succeeded at the task. I'm awesome. Naruto rolled his eyes at their excitement. Kids these days got too excited over the smallest things. Maybe, but you do know what the next step of the training is, right? Daisuke gulped at his tone and Naruto smiled evilly. Nope. Naruto formed 3 other shadow clones. All 3 of them sported the same evil grin as they each went through hand signs. You have to be able to stay sideways or upside down while my clones fire at you. Water release. Wild water wave. They each shouted out. Naruto's clones made sure to reduce the power to prevent them from getting hurt, but all 3 of them were now drenched and on the ground. Hey! No fair. Hikari shouted. You didn't say start. Naruto smiled at the sweet girl. The girl was sweet, happy, and bright, but was way too innocent. Hikari, do you think your enemy is going to say start before they kill you? The girl froze and then shook her head seriously. No, sensei. I'm sorry that I complained. Naruto nodded. I'm glad you understand. You three have to be able to do this exercise without even thinking about it. Just be glad that I'm not throwing kunai and shuriken at you. There's a teacher named Anko who used to do that with her students. The three of them shivered at that. Okay, Naruto-sensei. We'll try our best, Takaru said. Naruto took out a huge pile of snacks from a storage scroll. Here, I bought some goodies for anyone who can dodge for at least 10 minutes without falling to the ground. I don't even care if you get hit. Just make sure to stay above the ground. But, he motioned to Patamon and Tailman, they get to eat while you do this exercise. So if you take too long, you won't get any snacks. The guinea pig and the cat started eagerly going through the gigantic pile of snacks. Over the last few days, Naruto had learned that the two were bottomless pits whenever they saw something they liked to eat. And sweets were definitely on that list. Ah, no fair. Hikari whined but nodded as she walked up a tree. Tailman, she looked towards the small cat, please save some for me. Naruto raised an eyebrow as the cat smiled at the girl and nodded. He initially figured that Tailman understood Hikari from being with her for so long, but it appeared as if the cat was a bit more than just a simple cat. Naruto wondered if Tailman would become to Hikari what Akamaru was to Kiba. It would certainly help Hikari's fighting abilities if she had a ninja cat watching her back all the time. Patamon was the same way as well and fully understood whatever each of them said. Just watch. I'll get this done in the first 10 minutes. Daisuke shouted confidently. Try your best, Naruto-sensei. Naruto turned to look at the confident boy as he filed his thoughts about Tailman and Patamon in the back of his mind. Naruto smirked and nodded at his clones. Oh, don't worry, Daisuke, I will. Naruto started laughing as Daisuke immediately got knocked off his tree. Forests near Training Ground 25, Konoha, March 4, Alaska 22. It was her week off and Hanabi was currently training with Konohamaru, a fellow A-rank ninja. He was also the heir of a noble clan and was the honorable grandson of the third. He was a capable sparring partner. It was often too hard to gain the necessary experience to move up higher in level the higher she got. There were fewer people she could train with and even fewer she could learn from. That was why her night with Uzumaki had been so helpful to her. But she still needed a regular training partner around her level. After being placed in a squad together for a mission 3 years ago, she and the older teen had often trained together. They were about even. She was much more skilled than he was at close range and he was more versatile with options at close, middle, and long ranges. She had the benefit of the Byakugan while he had greater speed, strength, and endurance. Damn it, I hate it when I can't use my best technique on an opponent, Konohamaru said in a frustrated tone. Can't you just stay still for once? And get hit with the Rasengan? She inquired in a somewhat amused tone. Why would I do that? Hanabi sidestepped another shadow clone that had tried to thrust yet another Rasengan at her and using her momentum from the turn, swung her arm out in a gentle fist strike. Poof. I know, he said, it's just frustrating. I'm best at close range but you're so much better. She smirked. Well, I am a Hyuga, after all. Our entire fighting style is built for defense against all ranges and extreme offense at close range. She then added, try fighting exclusively from mid-range or further out. It'll help you expand your developing mid-range skills and I get to practice defending against them. Konohamaru nodded before jumped back. Fire release. Great flame. Kaden. Hanabi used her rotation to blow away the fireball. Water release. Burst whip. She struck at where Konohamaru was hiding. She could see him with her Byakugan, but he quickly dodged. Wow, I didn't know you knew a new technique. Don't tell anyone. I don't want my family to find out. There was a risk that her family would find out, but she needed to practice it on an opponent, and after what happened with Uzumaki, she no longer had a training partner. If she got caught, she would just pass off the technique as something she kept using to keep up her nature manipulation skills, which was a requirement for all Junin. She flung the whip again and came close to ensnaring the boy. Damn it, Hanabi. That thing looks painful. Big brother Naruto would probably be cracking a joke about how I'm completely whipped by a girl. She nearly tripped at that and groaned as a mental image of Uzumaki sporting a wide grin popped into her mind. Even when she wasn't seeing him, he found a way to drive her insane. For the last few days she barely could keep the sage out of her mind. Her mind would simply replay the scene where he was holding her close to dry her off. And then, there was the incident where he easily swatted away her blow. She had gotten a glimpse of his incredible power then, and it was difficult to forget. Hanabi shook her head as she saw Konohamaru duck and swerve a few times before going even further back. He was now out of her extended range. There was only one thing to do then. 8 trigrams vacuum palm. Hanabi had to wince after she saw her technique fly towards the boy. It was fast, but given the distance, Konohamaru might as well have an infinite amount of time to prepare. The gentle fist was incredibly limited in the range, and the few long-range techniques only wasted chakra. Uzumaki had been right. Konohamaru didn't appear to be satisfied with standing outside of her range, however. He drew a chakra blade and immediately formed a fire blade that coated the metal blade. Hanabi reactivated her water whip as she dodged the fireballs that he launched by swinging his blade as he rushed into her range. Not having any success ensnaring the older teen with only one water whip, she created another one and immediately grabbed his blade, expanded the water to cover his entire arm, and pulled as she raced forward. Konohamaru managed to free himself with a large burst of earth chakra from his trapped arm, absorbing the water, but Hanabi was already in range. 8 trigrams 64 palms. She panted after her technique was done, only to see Konohamaru disappear in a puff of smoke. She jumped up, knowing that Konohamaru had to be underground, but found her legs suddenly trapped by mud and dirt that had risen from the ground and hardened. Konohamaru placed his fire blade on her neck. And that's checkmate. Good match, Hanabi sighed. They were about even in skill and her intelligence covered her relative lack of power, but she lost to him more often than not to the older boy because of his greater experience. Still, it was always somewhat of a disappointment whenever she lost. Yeah, but what was that ribbon thing? Konohamaru asked. Well, you know as well as I do that I can't fight at a distance very well. Hanabi did not let her mind go to Uzumaki again lest she blush brightly at the memory. Learned of a way where I could extend my reach and grab my opponents to bring the battle into my range. That way, I can set the tone instead of trying to match theirs. Yeah, I bet, he said. The way you wave that thing makes it incredibly unpredictable. And since it looks like you're attacking with it, opponents are less likely to think that you're just using it to grab them and pull them in. It's still a work in progress. Ideally, it would be nice if I could channel my gentle fist attacks through the water, but I want to concentrate on grabbing first. Well, if that's a work in progress, I don't want to see the final product. That technique will end up being deadly, Konohamaru laughed before looking at his watch. Well, it looks like I'm almost late for my lunch date, so I'll be heading back now. Hanabi nodded as the boy disappeared in a body flicker. She started to practice by herself again with her water whip when she heard a huge swoosh. Swoosh. Boom. Hanabi turned on her Byakugan and saw a huge vortex of water off in the distance. She wondered if it was several Anbu squads participating in war games. That would be worth watching. She didn't have anything else to do, so she headed off towards the vortex of water. Forests near Training Ground 25, Konoha, March 4, Alaska 22. What were you saying again, Daisuke? Naruto glared at one of his students. Something about me being old and not being able to keep up with you young ones. Naruto realized that he probably didn't look like a responsible Junin sensei with all the fallen tree trunks everywhere. But he didn't care. He would teach his way. Lord Uzumaki. Naruto turned and saw Hanabi. He wasn't embarrassed, but what had happened several nights ago made the situation between them awkward. He could tell that the girl was hesitant to approach him. Naruto mentally sighed. There was just no way getting around this. He'd have to do it the usual way. Head on. Yo, what's up, little firecracker? The girl's face flushed. Naruto had to smile at that. The girl was proper and had a good handle on her emotions, but she wasn't nearly the stoic prick that her father was. The girl actually had a heart. The girl finally decided to sigh and ignore his comment and the awkwardness. It seems like we're always running into each other in the training grounds after you throw around incredibly destructive ninjutsu. Oh, that was just my water release. Hydro vortex at 1/10 of the original power, Naruto said casually. 1/10. The girl blanched. Naruto whistled innocently at that. Truthfully, it had been even weaker than that, but he wasn't going to tell that to anyone. It was best if people kept underestimating him, even if they did acknowledge him as a strong fighter. It was why he kept letting people think that he was still an idiot. Naruto had to mentally scoff at that. Did people really think that anyone who could spam shadow clones and gain knowledge 500 times faster than anyone else could be an idiot? Arrogant fools. Naruto shook his head. It wasn't the time to get angry at the villagers. Well, something like that, Naruto said with a grin. My kids thought they were getting a little too smug about their success in avoiding my shadow clones squirting them with extremely slow streams of water. Naruto-sensei, Takaru groaned. That was not just squirting us. Those water attacks were strong enough to break large tree branches off of the trees. And they weren't extremely slow either, sensei, Daisuke said. Naruto almost laughed when he saw that there were swirls in the boy's eyes. Those jets of water were faster than kunai thrown at full strength. And then you fire off that monstrous water tornado or something. We could have been killed, sensei, Hikari said. Tailman merely meowed sadly next to the wet girl. Takaru, Hikari, that's why you have to learn to control what Daisuke says. When your teammate runs his mouth off, he might make an enemy upset and do what I just did. Generally, enemies hold back against you for a while as they try to gauge your strength. Unfortunately, if you anger them too much, they'll put everything they have in the next few attacks. It's a real-life lesson for you all. The kids looked somber at that. Daisuke especially looked ashamed. Naruto figured the boy was probably feeling guilty for putting his pretty Hikari in danger. It looks like you're just making an excuse to drench your kids in water, Hanabi observed. Despite being annoyed at the girl for ruining his perfect excuse, Naruto was pleased that Hanabi had gotten over the awkwardness and stood next to him. Naruto nodded happily. Of course. The kids groaned at that. I take every opportunity to torture my cute little students. You're a meanie, Naruto-sensei, Hikari said while hugging Tailman. A really big, fat meanie. I may be a meanie, but you little brats are annoying, he returned in an even happier tone. It was much too fun to mess with children, even one as cute as Hikari. So I consider us even. Naruto turned to Hanabi again. So what are you doing here? I was training when I saw your hydro vortex from a few training grounds away, Hanabi explained. It was so powerful, the kids groaned again, that I thought it was part of some kind of war games that Anbu might have been carrying out. I was curious so I dropped by. Even the pretty lady says that it was powerful, sensei. Daisuke shouted while waving a fist in the air. You're being too harsh on us. We're still just kids. Naruto rolled his eyes. Whatever. Naruto then smirked. But Daisuke, if you want to impress Hikari, you need to be a man. His smirk grew wider. That means, you got to stop being such a little kid and you need to start facing my attacks head on without complaining. Naruto started chuckling when that shut the annoying little brat up. Daisuke had a good heart and even a good head on his shoulders, but he was way too focused on Hikari. For now that was okay and Naruto would allow it, but that habit needed to be broken fast. Such feelings became distractions on real missions. But what about us? Takaru moaned as Patamon flew around him. I want to be a kid for a little while longer. Takaru gave Naruto a pleading look. Sensei, just be harsh on Daisuke. Naruto laughed before he pulled out another storage scroll and tossed it on the ground where it revealed a picnic towel with food on it. Anyway, all three of you, eat. There aren't any snacks in this one, but I figured that you might be hungry after the training today. You'll have to deal with a sandwich or two for now, but I'll take you guys out to eat later. Consider it an apology for putting you through a mini hurricane. He ignored the cheers and walked a few paces away with Hanabi for some space and privacy. Training. He looked at Hanabi with a thoughtful expression. He wondered if she was practicing her newest addition to her style. She nodded. I tried to use my burst whip in battle against a training partner. Naruto was surprised that she used it out in the open, but nodded. He figured that she needed a real training partner to use it on. He briefly wondered who her training partner was. From what he knew about the girl, her genin teammates had died on missions in the past and she didn't have too many close friends. And, I still have issues with range, but I don't think that's ever going to change while I'm using the gentle fist style. Naruto nodded again. Ultimately, even long-range fighters have an extent to their range. Otherwise, long-range bombers could hit us here all the way from Iwa or Kumo. You just need to have a decent area where your techniques are effective. But I don't think that was your problem. Let me guess. You stood in one spot and tried to chase your partner with only your whip. Naruto noticed the girl was slightly surprised at that. Now that I think about it, I did. You're still used to fighting in the pure gentle fist style even if you've been making modifications to it over the last few years. I told you. The gentle fist is about making the least amount of movements to take out the enemy, so it's no surprise that you stood in one spot while following your enemy with your weapon. But you have to remember that even if they might not be physically fast as most close combat fighters, most long-range fighters are extremely agile and are highly adept at dodging. You'll have to chase them down, not just stay in one place hoping that they'll get hit. The girl looked thoughtful at that. Thank you, Lord Uzumaki. Naruto felt uncomfortable at the long silence that followed that. None of it really made any sense. It wasn't as if he liked her or she liked him. So why did the situation feel so strange? Hey, Naruto-sensei, introduce us to your girlfriend. Daisuke called out. She's really pretty. Naruto smirked at the outraged look on Hikari's face. No, not as pretty as you, Hikari. Naruto laughed at that, but Hanabi looked ready to kill someone. Naruto looked at her with a smile, inviting her to beat the kid down with a gesture. I won't tell anyone if you won't tell. Secret meeting place, Kumo, March 5th, Alaska 22. Sakuma Hyuga found himself in a small poorly lit room, talking to a large one-armed man. The room was much too cramped for a noble such as he, but he would suffer this humiliation for a while. Sacrifices did have to be made. After all, you had to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Officially, he was in Kumo for a diplomatic mission, but his true purpose was to find support for his plan. His plan to take over the Hyuga clan. We have no reason to trust your word. For all we know, this could be a trap designed by Konoha. In terms of numbers, Konoha is currently the strongest of great villages. How do we know that this is not some ploy to start a war? Lord Raikage, I assure you that Konoha has nothing to do with this. As for a war, you yourself are rather famous for calling us peace-loving tree huggers. Why would that change all of a sudden? Copy Ninja Kakashi is nowhere near the pacifist that Sarutobi and Senju were, and he is 10 times the strategist they were. I would not put it past him to fabricate a scenario where he had to go to war. After all, his father was disgraced because of a mission gone wrong against Kumo. Sakuma was getting annoyed at the inane arguments. Lord Raikage, Sakuma tried to keep the sarcastic tone out of his voice. I am sending you documents detailing the layout of my clan's entire compound. If this were a trap, it would be an incredibly stupid one, as we are handing you sensitive information about Konoha's strongest clan. Sakuma paused before deciding to throw a veiled insult. Surely, you have your own intelligence on Konoha and can confirm the truth of my words. The Raikage didn't seem convinced. Then, what of the Hyuga clan? Why should we listen to the words of a main house Hyuga who fear the secrets of their Byakugan being discovered? There is no guarantee your documents represent reality. Sakuma patiently listened to the barbarian ramble in an attempt to be intelligent. It was all a farce. Both of them knew that he spoke the truth and that the Raikage would accept his proposal. You know as well as I do that I seek to become the ruler of the Hyuga clan by becoming either the clan head or the Grand Elder. That should be proof enough. You will never get anything more certain than that in this wretched world of ours. The Raikage just muttered some profanities before nodding. Very well then. Kumo shall hear what you have to say. We have a window of about a month to carry an attack out, Sakuma explained. Hanabi Hyuga will become of age in about 3.5 weeks. On that day, there will be a challenge match between her and the first Princess Hinata. The winner of the match will immediately become appointed as the Crown Princess, which removes the possibility of a smooth takeover on my part. While my wish is to remove both heiresses permanently, it is too much of a difficult task to fully carry out. Instead, I want to use an indirect method. Such as, grunted the man. If the large oaf weren't a cage, Sakuma would have ended his miserable life right there. He didn't have a single bone of dignity in his body. Sakuma felt sick just being next to the despicable oaf. Sakuma cursed fate for forcing him to take power in such an undignified manner. He should have been the one to be the clan head, not that damned fool Hiashi who had been weaker than his own branch house brother. If Sakuma had been the clan head, then the Fourth Shinobi World War wouldn't have taken its toll on the Hyuga clan. Instead of volunteering to send his own clansmen out to the front lines, he would have held them back in reserve. The rest of Konoha had a duty to protect the nobles, not the other way around. Hiyashi's sense of duty to a village they owed nothing to was disgusting and unbecoming of a Hyuga. Hiyashi needed to be replaced by someone who would lead the Hyuga to greatness, not run it into the ground. Ultimately, I just need to have the potential heirs out of the way. The first princess has a certain fetish for undignified brutes, Sakuma spat out. She is in love with a certain Naruto Uzumaki. Uzumaki. He pounded the desk and destroyed it. I'm going to kill that idealistic brat one day. He talked of peace and prosperity for all. Yet ever since the last war, Kumo has been losing business to Konoha. This cannot stand. Sakuma mentally scoffed as he sidestepped the wooden pieces from the desk flying his way. How did such a narrow-minded fool ever become the Raikage? Sakuma had just mentioned of a name and the Raikage went out of control. He simply had no control over his emotions, just like that Uzumaki brat. I understand your anger and I can sympathize, Sakuma said silkily. Uzumaki has an unusual influence in our village and his idealism has infected much of the populace. It is rather difficult to enact order when people are shouting about morals. HMPH. Well, what is your proposal and what does it have to do with Uzumaki? As a Kage, you have considerable influence, even in other nations, Sakuma began carefully. It tore at his pride that he needed the help of an idiot like the Raikage, but it couldn't be helped. It would be yet another sacrifice that he had to make to rule the Hyuga clan. I request that you use that influence to try and force Uzumaki into an arranged marriage. Konoha has always been averse to conflict and will not be able to refuse. It certainly does help us, but how does getting Uzumaki out of your village help you? He asked suspiciously. Konoha will refuse to marry someone as, Sakuma paused. It would be painful to compliment the boy, powerful as the boy, away to someone in another country. Instead, they will force him to marry someone within Konoha to justify a refusal of a marriage alliance. I see, the Raikage muttered. You would have your older Hyuga princess marry Uzumaki. That would leave only one heiress for you to get rid of, which is where your plan would come in. Sakuma was impressed. Given how the conversation had gone on so far, he didn't think the Reikage had the intelligence to put that together. Uzumaki's personality is such that he would not want to be married to someone he does not know. He is, another pause, idealistic as you say and believes in the power of love. My sources tell me that while any young woman in Konoha would love to be matched with Uzumaki, Uzumaki himself is only close to a handful of other girls in his generation. He had been involved with Sakura Haruno, but she is now dead. He also knows the Yamanaka heir and the Kurama heir, but coincidentally, neither of them have any interest in him. It is very likely that our first princess will be the one matched with him. What about contingency plans? Kumo does not operate on what is likely. We operate on truth. There is no guarantee that your heiress will be married to him. And if things don't go your way, you would have to withdraw from this operation and we would have just used our political capital in other countries for no reason. If Uzumaki choose another girl, I shall either bribe the family to withdraw their daughter as a potential marriage candidate or arrange for an accident to happen. Money goes quite a long way, Lord Reikage. Why this roundabout way? Wouldn't it have been easier to wait till one of the heirs becomes the clan head and then assassinate her? With the second heir sealed, that would leave the seat of the clan head open for the taking. Foreign powers have already attempted to steal the Byakugan before. Sakuma was careful not to mention that it was Kumo that had tried to do so it would keep suspicion off of me if one of the princesses were kidnapped. I see, he grunted out again. Killing an heiress would only invite unwanted suspicion and an investigation. If you can blame it on us, then there would be no investigation along your end. You want to do this before one of the princess becomes the crown princess or clan head so that security is somewhat lighter. Indeed, if Hinata is sent off in marriage, there will be a time frame where the Hyuga will pay attention to the marriage and not on our own internal matters. The coronation of the crown princess will be set back, giving us more time to prepare and less security to deal with. On the other hand, if the challenge match took place, the coronation would happen immediately. The Reikage nodded. Very well, you have our cooperation. We shall sway the public opinion of several countries to push for arranged marriages with Uzumaki. The land of spring, the land of birds, and the demon country all have female rulers. I will notify my contacts in all three countries. As agreed, you will supply the means for us to kidnap the second princess. I believe you said her name is Hanabi Hyuga, correct? Sakuma nodded. Yes, I will provide an opening for whatever squad you might send as long as they cannot be traced back to me. The Reikage stood up and left the small room. As Sakuma transformed to a man with green eyes and dark skin, as was typical of those living in Kumo, he smiled. He was the smartest and the most powerful of the Hyuga. It was only his misfortune that he was not born into the royal family of the Hyuga. He would take by force what is his destiny. In his opinion, both of the princesses were weak because of a genetic flaw. A Byakugan from such weak girls couldn't compare with the Byakugan of the true Hyuga. The Reikage could celebrate all he wanted, but he would only be getting a defective Byakugan. The Hyuga clan had no need of such trash anyway. Sakuma laughed. In a month, he would be the new ruler of the Hyuga clan. The new Hyuga clan would be feared across the entire continent. Secret Hospital Room, Konoha, March 5, Alaska 22. Ino pulled her back from Sakura's head and turned to face the other three in the room. She shook her head to give them her answer. There's been no change in her status from a psychological point of view. Luckily, she still appears to be dreaming. Ino couldn't keep the slight anger out of her tone. When she said, luckily, it had sounded slightly sarcastic. Even after 2 months her best friend was still incapacitated and showed no sign of waking up. What was worse was that they had no leads on who the culprit was. Medically, her muscles are showing some signs of atrophy. It's nothing serious, but even with the nutrients we are giving her through her IV, her muscles are beginning to break down from lack of use, Shizune added. In fact, I'm surprised they lasted almost 8 weeks without any atrophy. We still have no leads on who did this. I've sent squads of Anbu to Naruto's neighborhood to investigate and there's still nothing. Can't you keep checking? Ino demanded. Her best friend was hurt and the attacker was still at large. She would not give up. At this point, we might have to just close the investigation for now, Shikamaru murmured softly. This is getting us nowhere. Ino was about to snap at him when the Hokage raised his hand to stop her. Ino, I know it's difficult to accept, but we need those Anbu out on the field. Naruto's already been running the gauntlet for the last few years, and he's showing signs of mental fatigue. I can't continue asking him to solo most of the consecutive S-rank missions that he gets. I've sent him on 38 in the last 2 years alone and he usually gets less than a day in between them as a break. 38. Solo. Ino repeated incredulously. She had barely done 2 in the last 6 years. Many people didn't survive past 3. And that was in squads. That's 1.5 S-rank mission per month. Some S-rank missions take half a year. That's why we had to send Naruto. He's incredibly fast at getting missions done. We really did not have a choice, the Hokage explained. On a given year, we get close to 25 S-rank requests. After the war, we were down to fewer than 4,000 ninjas including those on reserve. We couldn't afford to send out full squads on such missions with incredibly high mortality rates, nor could we have people out on the field for that long on one mission. We would have been weakening ourselves further. Ino was still flabbergasted at the number. One of her own S-rank missions had been to the Land of the Woods to eliminate the remnants of the vicious Prajna group that had sworn vengeance on Konoha for an unknown reason. There were rumors that an Anbu division had independently attempted to wipe them out many years ago, but they were unconfirmed. That battle had been the second scariest in her life, after the battle with the Jubi during the war. It had been the 4 Konoha ninjas against 28 Prajna ninjas and she had been the only one to make it out alive. Naruto was doing those kinds of missions solo. And 38 of those consecutively without rest in the last 2 years. Ino turned to look at Sakura. She was torn from wanting justice for her best friend and wanting to help her best friend's boyfriend who was also her childhood friend. Why did those two things have to be mutually exclusive? Didn't they have anywhere else they could cut back on? Ino, we've been really short-handed since the end of the last war, Shikamaru repeated the 6th's words as she nodded. After all, her father had died in the war. She knew that there had been losses. But the mission requests kept coming though and we did not have the capacity to accept all the requests without making some sacrifices. And you're saying that Naruto is just a sacrifice? Ino hissed. Naruto wasn't one of her closest friends, but she knew how much of a difficult life he has had. Now he was being asked to do even more for the village. Is that all you view him as? She demanded. I'm a psychologist and I know that even one of those kinds of mission can mentally scar even the hardiest of people. You're going to kill him at this rate. If not on the field, then indirectly because he'll take his own life to end the misery. I'm going to do a mental check-up on him the first chance I get. The 6th shook his head. The Kyuubi's chakra also buffers against mental fatigue so we can push him a little harder than most. A little. Ino felt like screaming. I still get nightmares from my own S-rank mission. You're having him do that day and night. Kyuubi chakra or not, that's going to take a toll on a human. Her eyes narrowed dangerously, of course, unless you're calling him a demon. She got some vindictive pleasure when the gray-haired Hokage jerked back as if he had been slapped in the face. Ino, Shikamaru said in a low tone. You're being unreasonable here. That comment was uncalled for. The Hokage recovered as she gave a scathing glare at the shadow user. She was only looking out for her friends. There was nothing unreasonable about that. Lord Kakashi sighed. With Naruto taking the bulk of the worst missions, we were able to keep everyone else alive and training. Now we're almost back to where we were before the war. It's not a great place to be. Even those numbers were nothing like the numbers we had before Suna and Oto invaded. Even so, I understand that Naruto is carrying an immense load. I'm trying to give him a break by having him become a Junin sensei. That's why it's imperative that we end this investigation quickly. We need those Anbu back out on the field. TCH. Ino crossed her arms, still not convinced. I don't understand why all those missions are necessary to begin with. Sabotage, espionage, assassinations. Why do we do those things at all and still claim that we desire peace? No matter how you look at this, we're doing the same things that the other countries are by looking out for only our best interests. Ino, Shikamaru groaned. Ino threw him a look. They had had these discussions often and Shikamaru always had brushed her off as troublesome. We're in front of the Hokage, okay. Just give it a rest. A lot of these missions aren't just for money or to expand our power. Most of Konoha's S-rank missions, as far as the ones that I know of, are counter-espionage and protection from assassinations. The assassination orders that do go out are to kill people deemed incredibly dangerous to Konoha. These things need to be done. Ino stepped back when her teammates' eyes grew cold, or I suppose you rather have the fire daimyo killed every other week. She sighed. She knew all that they did was necessary, but that didn't mean she had to like it. The last war was supposed to be the war to end all wars, and yet, just 1 year after the war ended, the Grand Ninja Alliance fell apart and the villages were at each other's throats again. Ino suspected that even though most of the shinobi were tired of fighting, the royals and the nobles in the capitals of the countries were still too ambitious and greedy to actually want peace. But why Naruto? She argued. You're closer to him than I am. You should know just how much he's done for the village. By the end of his career, he'll be nothing but a shell of a human being. Ino, Lord Kakashi interrupted, I'm his sensei. How do you think I feel about doing this to him? Do you think I like torturing him? But, he went on, being his sensei, I know Naruto can take the punishment and come out stronger for it. And he has. I had and have faith in him. I suggest you have a little more faith in Naruto as well. He's the man who saved us all. But, Ino stammered. That was true. It had slipped her mind that Lord Kakashi was probably hurting the most. And did you forget that Sakura is another of my precious students as well, and the person that my student and future successor loves the most? He asked in a strained voice. I take no pleasure in doing this. None. But these things are necessary for the village. Ino wanted to argue, so she looked at Shizune, the one person who might be sympathetic to her cause. Ino found the older woman shaking her head. It appeared that Shizune wasn't too happy either, but had either given up arguing or agreed with the Hokage's assessment. Ino sighed. She was glad that she wasn't the Hokage. These types of decisions were way too complicated for her. Ino, Shikamaru said in a kind voice. It's not like Sakura's going to die anytime soon. We've already started to uncover parts of the seal. Ibiki's going over those seals with the leading sealing elites and experts in our village every single day to try to break Sakura out of this. We can worry about finding the culprit then. Sakura will understand the sacrifice we have to make to keep her boyfriend. He shifted around to find the right word, sane as you put it. Ino gave up and just nodded. She looked back at her pink-haired friend. She was just another casualty of the world they lived in. Just how many people had to be sacrificed until the hate and the bloodthirst of the world would be satisfied? Finally, mission accomplished. Hanabi stared stoically at her brown-haired subordinate who had a wide grin on his face. Say that after we're safely clear of the land of hot water and back to Konoha. Make sure to keep your guard up on the way back. Taichi Io crossed his arms. Ah, don't be like that, Captain. We just spent a week on edge because we were guarding a daimyo during negotiations for the price of rice wine. We all know that nothing ever happens on these kinds of missions. It's just that the nobles are paranoid and self-satisfied pricks that they pay for an A-ranked mission. That may be the case, Io, but never let your guard down, she returned in a soft voice. There were so many situations in the past where letting her guard had cost her. Her own teammates had died because of an ambush. If she had had the sense and the awareness to activate her Byakugan earlier, then they might not have died. People said that she was too harsh on herself, but Hanabi knew it had been her job to prepare her teammates for any possible attack. It wasn't feasible to keep her bloodline on all the time, but she should have had activated it at random intervals and done regular checks whenever possible. The kid does have a point, you know. Hanabi turned to the other female member of her squad. It was Tenten, her late cousin's old genin teammate. I could definitely use the extra pay, so I'm not complaining, but this mission was a total bore. I agree. There was not enough youthfulness on this mission. I must make up the lost time with extra training. I will try to lift up this rock with my nose. If I can't do that, then all. Hanabi tuned out the vigorous statements of youth from the final member of the squad. She never understood how Neji dealt with Lee back when the two were genin teammates. She was fairly familiar with him and Tenten since they often visited Neji when he had been alive and because she worked with them on quite a few missions, but she still couldn't help feeling irritated by Lee's antics. Still, she wouldn't admit it, and least of all to Io, but there was something off about this mission. Hanabi had learned in her classes that before the Fourth War, scrupulous nobles regularly hired A ranks for protection in addition to having their own samurai guards, each of which could stand against a chunin or even a junin. But even then, only one A rank would be requested, and those were more dangerous times. There definitely was no need for two A rank ninjas on this mission, even if one of those two was officially classified only as a special junin. Perhaps there was a shady deal going on that required more protection. AN, genin or D rank by default, chunin or C rank, junin or B rank by default, with special junin being somewhere in between B and C. Elite junin or A ranks. There are no more than a couple dozen A ranks at most in each village. As for S ranks, there are only a couple dozen of these across the entire elemental nations. Note that there are exceptions. Naruto was classified as S rank as a genin after the war, and Lee is currently an A- rank as a special junin. But Tenten is the typical B rank, as are most members of the original Rookie 9. Ah well, I suppose Captain Hyuga does get paid to be paranoid. Io rolled his eyes while speaking in a mocking tone. She's the captain for a reason. Hanabi felt tempted to snap at the boy. As a Hyuga who was trained to read others, she knew that older teen had something of a crush on her. Hanabi initially didn't want to comment on it because it wouldn't be proper on a mission, but she was reaching breaking point. His little crush on her was flattering, but she could do without the attention and the little jabs here and there. Do you really have to bring that up every minute or something? Tenten grumbled. We get it. You're feeling emasculated because you're taking orders from a girl. It's not that. Io protested. Hanabi would have rolled her eyes at the chunin's protests and his attempts to explain himself. Tenten had something of an inferiority complex, so she would often automatically jump to the conclusion that the world was considering her and other Kunoichi weak. That mindset prevented Tenten from seeing the true reason why Io kept pestering Hanabi. It worked well in this case. Hanabi did not want to spend the next few days being teased by her older teammates. Lee especially would shout something about the springtime of youth, and how love was youthful. Speaking of which, Hanabi turned to her other teammate. She felt herself about to twitch in annoyance when she saw that he was trying to climb a tree with 2 fingers. Lee would never change. Then what is it? Tenten demanded. I'm just trying to get a reaction out of her. Io quickly explained. It's just that the elites have some kind of. He too turned to look at the spandex-wearing ninja, who was now trying to use his forehead to knock down a tree. Strange quirk. Lee Senpai can't speak 10 words without saying something about youth, and Captain Hanabi is like the ice princess or something. She won't even call me by my first name even after 2 weeks. I'm trying to figure out how to advance in my career, so I'm paying attention to how my superiors are. He was lying, of course, but Hanabi allowed him to save face in front of Tenten. More importantly, his comment made her pause for a moment. Io did have a point. Hanabi herself felt the same way about Uzumaki. He had some interesting quirks himself. She shook her head. Even after nearly 2 weeks, she couldn't get her mind off the toad sage. The feeling of his powerful aura when blocked her 8 trigrams vacuum palm was fresh in her mind, and the embarrassing situation during their training accident did not help her to forget about him in the least. There was also the fact that he was intriguing. The main house generally did not like the toad sage. They grudgingly accepted that he was physically strong and had the respect of most of the village, but they claimed that he was too idealistic and too disrespectful. The Hyuga clan respected order and hierarchy, which was everything Uzumaki stood against. Uzumaki was too kind to others and showed too much empathy and softness towards others. Yet, in her meetings with him, the toad sage challenged her original perceptions of power. He was brash, but he was charismatic. He wasn't stoic, but he still felt deadly. It was hard to get a complete read on the man. For someone who was supposed to wear his emotions on his sleeves, Uzumaki was quite the mystery. Crackle. Hanabi instantly tensed and got ready for battle, noting with satisfaction that both Lee and Tenten heard the noise also. She had done a check in the area 10 minutes before, so it couldn't possibly be an enemy. But the noise was too loud and deliberate to be some wild animal. There was no ominous chakra being emitted, but a chakra signal could always be hidden through special armors. Hanabi quickly activated her Byakugan to check once more. It may very well be an incredibly fast enemy. Byakugan, she intoned mentally. Hey, what's wrong? Io asked, noting the shift in attitude around them. Hanabi's eyes widened as she tried to push Io out of the way. Watch you. Before any of them could react further, a huge man jumped in front of the brown-haired teen and hit him with a powerful punch. Her Byakugan told her that Io's entire chest was crushed and that fragments of his ribs were puncturing almost every organ. Io was dead before he even hit the tree. Hanabi ducked under his second swing and let the huge fist pass over her. She and her remaining teammates jumped back and stood in a triangular formation. Weak. The man shouted. Ninjas from the great villages are weak. Hanabi frowned at what her Byakugan was telling her and ignored the fact that one of her teammates had just died. Hanabi felt a pang of guilt, but she would worry about that later, especially since this man appeared to be incredibly fast, just about as fast as she was. There was nothing she could have done. If anything, she had just barely dodged the second blow herself. The man was covered in strange flame-shaped markings and had a circular seal with the yin-yang-like symbol on his forehead. The strange part was that the two swirls of the yin-yang circle were separated, making them look like two different commas going in opposite directions rather than a full yin-yang circle. Furthermore, Hanabi couldn't see any chakra. She could see inside of him just fine, but she couldn't see any chakra flowing through the body. Even a dead body would have a foreign source of chakra to power it. The only thing this person had was an extremely thin layer of chakra surrounding his entire body. It was so thin that she could barely see it. It must be Fuinjutsu preventing my eyes from seeing any chakra inside of his body. But only the Hyuga could come up with a seal that blocks our own eyes. And what she saw confirmed that it wasn't a Hyuga seal. Why would someone create a seal that only blocks visualization of chakra flow? It appeared almost as if the person who designed those seals forgot that the Hyuga can attack more than just the chakra points. Still, she would proceed cautiously. She wasn't ready to die just yet. She still had lots of things in life she wanted to do. She wanted to explore the countryside, take a trip across the ocean, and of course, find a person to love. None of those things were really possible while she was the Hyuga princess, but she always hoped that she would one day be free. There was no way she would let her life end because of a careless mistake in some random forest. Lee, take point. Tenten, provide ranged support. I'll jump in if there is an opening. Alright, sounds like a plan, Tenten agreed as she took out several large scrolls. Let's kick this guy's butt for what he did to Taichi. Yosh! Lee shouted out, half in anger about the death of their teammate and half in excitement for the battle. Hanabi and Lee ran towards the burly man as Tenten provided ranged support to prevent the man from maneuvering to the sides and outflanking them. Strangely enough, the man did nothing but snarl. He drew his arm back just as Lee started to attack. She frowned. She couldn't any chakra being used or expelled as the man took his swing. That ruled out ninjutsu. Nonetheless, the swing was powerful enough to make Lee to wince in pain even with his guard up. That made no sense. It was almost impossible for anyone to have strength to hit Lee head on and come out on top without the use of any ninjutsu. Hanabi observed as Lee ducked under the next kick, clearly electing to dodge rather than block. The man's fighting technique was rather poor and easy to read, but there was some trick to it that she couldn't figure out. Seeing an opening, she quickly flashed forward with a palm strike. Even if she couldn't see the chakra points, she could still see his organs and damage those. To her shock, however, the chakra in her hands dissipated as soon as she got close. What the? Hanabi, get out of the way. Focusing on the situation at hand, she jumped over the downward punch as Lee kicked the man in the back of the head, knocking him forward. Close-range battle was dangerous. She needed to get more information before she jumped in. Her mind flashing back to Uzumaki, she quickly flew her hands through signs. Water release. Burst whip. You little pests. Die. Roared the burly man as Lee tried an uppercut. Lee. Back. She shouted as she jumped back to where Tenten was. Using her water whip, she tried to grab onto the man only to find the water falling out of her control before disappearing altogether when it got near him. Lee had noticed it as well and swerved midway through a kick. TCH, she heard Tenten mutter from next to her. Just as her water technique disappeared, Tenten had launched a spiked cannonball with an explosive tag on it. Boom. Tenten, that's not going to work, Hanabi said, seeing through the explosion. What the hell is he? Tenten muttered as the smoke cleared. The man was hurt, but only because from the broken pieces of the ball that had been blasted towards him from the explosion. The explosion itself didn't hurt him. You saw it, didn't you, Lee? Hanabi asked. Yes. Just as I hit him, I felt the part of my foot that kicked him lose its youth. I also had confirmation when I saw that your water technique dissipated as it got close to him. Those markings look somewhat familiar. I believe that it is the source of his power. If the situation were not so dire, Hanabi might have rolled her eyes as his comment about youth. Even during a battle, he spoke in that ridiculous way of his. But Lee was correct. The man had some ability to reduce their fighting strength. Furthermore, he was somewhat difficult to see with her Byakugan because he had no chakra flow. She had grown accustomed to differentiating the different chakra signals when she had her bloodline activated, but all she saw was a black spot with gray organs. It was probably why the man had been able to sneak up on them. It was likely that she assumed that he was something dead or inanimate when she did a quick sweep of the area with her eyes earlier. Pathetic. How did the great villages control the world for so long with such meager strength? He shouted. While the man was ranting and pounding his chest like a wild gorilla, the man was dangerous and Hanabi made sure to keep her eyes on his as she talked with her teammates. You mean that he has some kind of power that weakens us? Tenten asked. It's hard to say, Hanabi answered. This is merely a hypothesis at this point, but I think his body repels and disperses all forms of chakra. I noticed that the chakra in my hand disappeared the moment it came in contact with him. The same was true for my water technique. We all use chakra as the basis for all our techniques, so our attacks become ineffective the moment we touch him. Chakra-based techniques are completely ineffective. I think it has to do with some of the seals he has on his body. That would explain why the explosive tag didn't work because the explosion itself is chakra-based. But Lee only uses taijutsu, Tenten frowned. That doesn't require chakra. Hanabi shook her head as they dodged the charging man. No, all living things have chakra. So even the most basic movements require some chakra. It is the reason why the people cannot even stand when even only as few as 64 of their 361 chakra points are hit. Lee is only unable to mold and shape that chakra, he still uses it to enhance his muscles. Then how is he using so much power without chakra? Tenten demanded. If his seals are what is making him immune to chakra, then they should work both ways. Seals that distinguish the user from the surroundings are incredibly complex and difficult to make. It's not just chakra nullification, Lee said as he flipped over the man and landed another kick on him that lost most of its power. I remember now where I saw these seals, or at least the ones with those flame patterns that are all over his body. The legendary Sannin Orochimaru used to place these on his men as an unythful way to boost their power. He might be using the flame-shaped seals as a power boost, while the other strange circular seal that has the yin-yang-like symbol on it might be preventing attacks from affecting him. You call that a kick? Roared the crazed man. That felt like a love tap. Hanabi frantically tried to figure out what to do. There was no point in arguing over what gave the man his strange powers. None of that changed the fact that they were fighting an opponent who had a massive boost in power, while their own techniques were completely ineffective. Lee voiced her thoughts. What do you suppose we do? Both your gentle fist and my strong fist are ineffective against him, Lee grunted out. Their opponent had clearly decided that Lee needed to be the next one to die. Hanabi briefly wondered if the man was attracted to green, akin to how bulls were attracted to red. Die. 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 The man roared, charging straight into another tree and destroying it. Fortunately, as long as we maintain our distance, we won't die. He's fast, but he doesn't seem to be agile as we are. Keep jumping around and making sharp turns. Just make sure to not get touched. If he grabs a hold of us though, we'll be helpless. That doesn't solve our problem. I doubt he'll just let us keep dodging, and we don't know whether or not we'll end up tiring before he does. We need to fight him here while we have our full strength. Hanabi went through all the available information. Pure taijutsu was ineffective. That took Lee out. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, or chakra-based taijutsu were out. That ruled her out. Tenten's fighting style revolved heavily around the use of explosive tags, and those were only minimally effective. Hanabi supposed they could try to draw him into the center of a trap and knock all the trees down at once with the tags, but that was probably too difficult given that their enemy just kept smashing any tree in his way. Fuinjutsu, Tenten's secondary specialty, was no good either. She looked at Tenten, who threw a dozen projectiles to give Lee the space to dodge. Projectiles themselves were too weak and were too easily dodged. Wait, Tenten, what's the deadliest longest-range weapon you have while still maintaining a high degree of speed, accuracy, and agility? Tenten's eyes widened in realization and thought for a second. I suppose a sword, staff, or spear. I have more weapons that provide range, but they're all too easy to dodge and would leave me completely open to a counterattack. Those tools are only good for one hit. I was hoping for something longer, but it'll have to be a sword then, Hanabi remarked as she caught a katana from the other girl. She wasn't an expert, much less an elite, with weapons, but she could still hold her own for some time. I wasn't aware that you knew how to fight with weapons. From what Neji used to tell me, the Hyuga clan never allowed any of their members to use anything other than the gentle fist. I was already shocked that you just used water ninjutsu. Hanabi nodded. You're correct, but I still had to go through the basic Junin training. You will have to take point though. I can only fight a delaying action with a sword. Let's go relay the message to Lee so he can start using his nunchaku. And make sure not to channel chakra into your blade. She thanked whatever deity out there for giving her the foresight to practice with other styles of fighting. It probably was going to end up being the thing that saved her life that day. Roger. Odo, Land of Rice Fields, March 14, AK-22. Kabuto. Kabuto almost jumped when he heard the voice, but gave no indication that he had been startled. He was feared shinobi for a reason, after all. He couldn't let people know that he felt fear himself. Ah, it's you again. Taiyo no Kuroi Kokuden. You know it's rude not to knock. Kabuto said in a pleasant tone. Spare me the pleasantries, Kabuto, came the curt response. Kabuto frowned. As always, the man was cloaked, hooded, and masked so it was hard to tell who it was. The voice sounded slightly garbled, no doubt with a voice modifier. And the man spoke in an irritating archaic manner. I'm here to deliver the next batch. The man pulled out a box containing many small sheets of paper. Kabuto nodded as he examined the seals. The design inside the yin-yang components looks slightly different from the last batch. What changed? Kokuden was silent for a moment, no doubt thinking how to phrase his response. If there was one thing certain about this man, it was that he was quite deliberate, even with his words. While the dispersion seal protects the user from any chakra-based damage, the converse is true as well. Since chakra is disrupted the moment it crosses the seal, which is placed on the skin, the user is also unable to use anything other than taijutsu. I am looking for a way to circumvent this flaw. Considering that most ninjas rely heavily on ninjutsu, the seals are quite effective as is, Kabuto casually remarked. Even taijutsu relies on subconscious enhancement of muscles with chakra. I wouldn't go as far to say that your seals have a flaw. You were already able to increase the nullification range to 1 centimeter away from the user while still allowing the user to use chakra within his or her body. It's quite the accomplishment. The payment. You still didn't answer my question, Kabuto said with a small frown. Kabuto had no doubt that the person in front of him was quite strong, but he had a couple of trump cards of his own. One of which included having found a way to reuse the previous sets of seals that he received. With a few more sets of these seals, he would no longer need the cloaked man. It would be nice to know what these seals do before I let my men use them. The new effects are in the testing phase. I cannot say with any certainty as to what they will do. The only thing I can say with certainty is that they will not die. Ah, but tell me what they're designed for, Kabuto returned. I'm not quite a fuinjutsu master, but I am an academic and can appreciate a nice long conversation of chakra theory. Kabuto decided to throw in a veiled threat. I've studied the Sharingan and the bodies of different members of the Uchiha for years and know quite a lot of forcibly molding chakra. Kabuto prepared himself for an attack. Kabuto suspected that his last statement meant something to the cloaked man. Do not waste my time, Kokuden replied, not giving any indication that he cared, much less try to figure out who I am. I did no such thing, Kabuto said silkily, even though he was lying. The other man was quite skilled in hiding his emotions and even better at reading them. Kokuden was dangerous. The man's tone became serious. I require the payment now. I should remind you that I have no true need for you. I can always find other buyers for my seals. You, on the other hand, need these seals to keep your operations going. Your sound forces are outmatched in both quality and quantity. These seals are the only things keeping you going. Not even your pathetic research has provided you with a way to keep up with the great villages. Kabuto resisted the desire to grit his teeth in anger. Kabuto was normally mild-mannered, but Kokuden always took the opportunity to insult his work and his efforts. Kabuto didn't care about strength, but he did care about his research. Strength was only a means to an end. Strength allowed him to gain better subjects and more funding for his research. Research that was invaluable to the world and help in the evolution of mankind. Kabuto took a few deep breaths to calm down and gave his best smile. Kabuto wouldn't let his opponent know that he was irritated. Emotions were like cards in a game of poker. They had to be played carefully and at the right time. How about a business transaction then? As you mentioned, I am outmatched in numbers. So I can't simply use unknown seals on my men. While they might not die, there might be effects that prevent them being able to fight again or reduce their usefulness. That is something I wish to avoid. So, for information on your newest and subsequent batches, instead of giving you written reports, I'll give you information on where I'm sending my men so you can see your seals in action for yourself when they encounter hostile ninjas. Think of it as a field testing for your experiments. There was a long pause. Kabuto knew that he was grasping at straws because not a single man had died as a result of Kokuden's seals. If anything, given Kokuden's mastery in Fuinjutsu, these newest batches had already been perfected in terms of adverse events. Even the failures in the past did nothing to negatively affect any of his men. Still, part of what Kabuto said had been true. He did appreciate a good discussion on theory. He wasn't as obsessed with finding the meaning of the world as Orochimaru was, but he did want to have the knowledge and the infinite amount of resources to carry out experiments in order to create a much more beautiful world. I do not need to observe the results myself. Furthermore, I tire of your constant attempts to find loopholes in my orders. Do not think for 1 second that I don't know that your men are goading ninjas from other villages so your men can act in self-defense. You are intentionally trying to move against the great villages and the big 5 nations without my approval. Kabuto frowned. How did this man know that? Was the man following his men already on their different missions? If so, Kabuto needed to take care of Kokuden as quickly as possible. Right now it didn't appear as if Kokuden knew of Kabuto's ultimate plan, but that may change. I shall relay strict commands to my men, Kabuto said in an apologetic tone. It may appear as if I gave that order, but because of the background of my men, most of his forces were bandits and low-class missing ninjas, it is rather difficult to fully control them. They are like raging beasts, you know. Not at all like cultured and educated men as we are. I assure you that this will not happen anymore. Kokuden paused before nodding. Very well. I accept your apology and, for now, I will even ignore your little tricks. But I will ask for double the payment. Kabuto frowned. Money wasn't too difficult to get, not that he was going after missing ninjas, but double the amount he normally paid was a high price. Still, information was useful and more important than money. So Kabuto nodded in agreement. Agreed. Now the explanation. What do you know about using other sources of power instead of chakra? Land of Hot Water, March 14, AK-22. Hanabi panted lightly as she dodged a kick. Hanabi flipped over while slashing with her sword at her newest enemy who had just arrived. She then quickly body flickered back to where her 2 teammates were. All things considered, their plan to only use weapons and with Tenten taking the lead had gone well. Tenten had managed to cut the big crazed oaf down, but apparently the enemy had been part of a squad. They were now facing off 3 more ninjas. While they did not appear to be physical tanks as the first ninja who had kept fighting despite dozens of deep wounds, these 3 seemed to be much more intelligent. They also looked furious at seeing their teammate go down. Hanabi glanced at her teammates with her Byakugan. She and they had wasted too much chakra trying to deal with the first ninja. They weren't wounded in the least, and still had plenty of energy left, but they were starting to get tired from spending too much chakra in an effort to dodge all the blows. An example was when Hanabi had found herself a few centimeters away from being grabbed. She had instinctively spun into a Kaden, but instead of knocking the man back, all it did was slow him down as the dense chakra slowly dissipated on contact with the man. That extra second or 2 provided the time she needed to escape, but had cost a significant amount of chakra. She was sure, she was fairly certain that she was stronger than all the 3 ninjas in front of her combined, but with her best techniques ineffective, she was worried she might tire herself out before we could find a proper opening to kill them. At the moment, though, it didn't appear as if she was going to be attacked. By default, her range with the full 360-degree vision was around a kilometer, but she could extend that to nearly 10 kilometers by focusing in just one direction. Conversely, she could narrow the vision to 50 meters around her if she wanted even greater clarity of vision over range, such as seeing the chakra points of her opponents, which she usually did in a battle. Right now, however, she needed to check to see if there were going to be any more enemies. Hanabi consciously extended the range of her Byakugan and quickly did a visual sweep of the area. I see someone in a cloak a little more than a kilometer away, holding a telescope towards this direction. Was he watching this battle the whole time? Hanabi did not miss the fact that he stood just outside the range of her Byakugan. That was no accident. The man was clearly informed of the capacities of the Byakugan and the habits of the Hyuga. Hinata, being the only Hyuga to be a regular part of a scouting and espionage squad, regularly used the telescopic capabilities of the Byakugan, but most Hyuga were combat-oriented and preferred not to sacrifice the 360-degree vision that came with their regular Byakugan mode. They too, like Hanabi, preferred using the narrow and microscopic 50-meter vision so that they could see the chakra points in their opponents' bodies. In any case, she would not have found this strange, cloaked man without shifting to the telescopic abilities of her eyes. This man was already aware of their identities. Her eyes narrowed as she shifted them back to the default state to regain the full range of vision around her. We've been ordered not to avoid fights with ninjas as much as possible, one of them said, while taking up a battle stance, but those orders didn't include times when we were attacked first. Hey, your buddy down there attacked us first and even killed one of our teammates. Tenten shouted. She glared at the red-haired man who looked ready to kill. The enemies ignored Tenten. Another one placed his hand on the shoulder of the one who assumed a battle stance. Hey, stop it. Boss is going to be mad. No one's going to miss Muzo. Besides, we're running low on time. I estimate there's only about 5 minutes left at most. 5 minutes is more than enough to take out these pieces of trash. This mission was a waste of my time and I'm in the mood for nailing some ladies. The one with the white eyes looks rather exotic. Hanabi felt a surge of rage at that comment, but stamped it down in favor of regaining as much chakra as she could. She made a note to thank Uzumaki again for preparing her to deal with lewd comments and then internally groaned when she realized she had been thinking about him again. Damn it, she was becoming worse than Hinata. Hanabi made a sarcastic mental comment to herself that such traits must run in the family. Trash. Do you not recognize her? The lone female member in the squad was pointing at her. That's Hanabi Hyuga. You're going to get us killed, idiot. Get laid on your own time. Not while on a damn mission. Get your hands off me. A Hyuga? That's even better. I bet boss will reward us if we manage to capture her. Of course, that's after I've had my way with her. Hanabi readied herself and saw her teammates getting ready for battle as their enemies tried to stop their red-haired teammate. She whispered to her teammates, "These guys have the same abilities as the first. Do not let them touch you. Also, there is someone about a kilometer away watching us. It may be an enemy, so we'll have to conserve as much chakra as we can to escape or fight if he comes." She received quick nods. If you bastards want to go back, then you can go by yourselves. The first man roared as black marking covered him. Hanabi pulled her sword in front of her to parry when the man she saw in the distance suddenly appeared before them and grabbed the blade with a gloved hand. Instantly, she and her teammates jumped back into one of the trees to avoid whatever danger that might have appeared. When it became clear that it was the same man that Hanabi had warned her teammates about, Tenten turned to her. Hanabi, I thought you said he was about a kilometer away. Tenten hissed in an alarmed tone. Tenten, Hanabi wasn't wrong or trying to mislead us, Lee said before Hanabi could defend herself. He was uncharacteristically serious. That was a space-time ninjutsu. An incredibly advanced one at that. Tenten froze at that. It was well known that space-time ninjutsu could only be used by ninjutsu masters. This man was not weak. Hanabi kept her eyes on the man while keeping up her guard. Yes. He's quite skilled if he was able to cross a distance of more than a kilometer in less than a second with such precision. That's difficult to do even with space-time ninjutsu. Hey, who the hell are you? You were ordered to never be the aggressors, the man said in a slightly garbled voice. It appears that Kabuto really does keep his men on a rather loose leash. Oh well, I suppose I already agreed to overlook the rash and reckless actions of his foolish followers. Kabuto? Lee asked in a low voice. Wasn't that the one who created those undead bodies during the war? Hanabi didn't know. She was far too young to be a big part of the war. She looked to Tenten for confirmation, but Tenten was too busy observing those below them. How do you know about Lord Kabuto? Demanded the Kunoichi as black markings started covering her too. Change of plans. We can't let anyone in the area get away with that information. Attack now. The red-haired ninja ripped his sword out of the man's grip and tried to thrust the sword forward as the other two rushed forward to help. The cloaked man merely held up a single hand sign and held his other hand out. Fire release. Phoenix flame burst. Hanabi had to shield her eyes as fire-natured chakra erupted from the man's hand in the shape of a huge firebird before flashing forward at an incredibly fast speed. The chakra from the technique was intense. Such amazing power. That's more chakra than I have in my entire reserves. The huge wave of fire disappeared after about 10 seconds, revealing 3 completely charred bodies. Her jaw dropped. There was an indent in the earth 3 meters wide and a meter deep that extended for almost an entire kilometer. She personally hadn't seen such damage since the crater left by Pain during the Akatsuki invasion. She wasn't there to see the actual attack, but she did get to see the results. What a shame, the man remarked as if he talking about the weather. The chakra dispersion limit was much lower than I thought. The seals are too easily overloaded when the input of chakra is that high. I had hoped that they would survive with those seals on. But it seemed like all it did was to reduce the damage to keep their bodies in one shape. Hanabi shivered slightly at the detached tone, not even bothering to hide her fear. The last fire technique contained more chakra than she had at full power, but the man didn't even look winded. If the man wanted to kill her, there was nothing she could do about it. Hanabi just continued to stare at the man with her mouth open, not caring about the undignified look she had on her face. This is the true difference in power between an A- rank and S rank. I can see that the S ranks are called masters for a reason. The power gap between elites and masters is absolutely ridiculous. Is this the realm that Naruto Uzumaki lives in? Uzumaki again. She resigned herself to having him on her mind. There was a chance she could die and she might as well indulge herself before she did. Hanabi reflected on what people said about him. Some said that the Toad Sage was an idiot with too much power, but it was at that moment that she realized just how inaccurate that was. A fool with this much power would have already destroyed the village at the first insult hurled at him. If he was being an idiot, it was because he chose to portray himself as such. To control this amount of power required a tremendous amount of maturity and wisdom. Just how much did Uzumaki hide about himself from the world? She shook herself out of her thoughts and looked at the cloaked man. It appeared that he too was wearing something that circumvented the Byakugan's ability to see chakra flow. However, instead of the emptiness that she saw in the previous ninjas, she just saw a dim yellow light without any pathways or chakra points. Hanabi guessed that his chakra signal would be blinding had he not worn those black chakra-muting robes and cloak. The man turned to face them. Hanabi saw that even his face was covered with a black mask. There was nothing to tell her where he was from. Now then, Konoha Shinobi, what shall I do with you? Hanabi didn't dare answer and just stood there shivering in fear. Despite the lack of killing intent in the air, the man's aura was heavy. She looked at her teammates. Tenten wasn't faring any better and looked like she was about to pass out. Lee seemed to handling it much better than either of them, but Hanabi suspected that that was because he experienced extremely high levels of killing at close range during the Fourth Shinobi World War. On the other hand, for Hanabi, it was the first time she was facing anyone putting out this much power. Lee jumped down smoothly, not appearing to care about pressure in the air. Hanabi knew better though. Her Byakugan saw through the act. Lee was extremely wary of the man and was looking for a way to escape. We do not wish to fight. We were merely fighting a defensive battle with those other ninjas. To think that you can move so freely under the full unrestrained pressure of my aura, the man commented in an impressed tone. Fantastic. Even the Hyuga. While she is mentally afraid of action, it appears that she is able to move her body at will. Your last teammate just fainted from the pressure, but still lasted quite longer than I expected. Not at all a bad squad, all things considered. Konoha has some talented ninjas. Hanabi forced herself to stop shivering and consciously expanded her chakra around her to shield herself from the effects of the chakra pressure a bit more. She felt the pressure diminish slightly, but not disappear. But it did become easier to ignore the part of her brain screaming at her to curl up into a ball and cry. She jumped down next to Lee. The man didn't seem bloodthirsty, so there was a chance that they might be able to talk their way out of this situation. My teammate is correct. We were finishing up a mission when we were attacked by what appeared to be a rabid ninja who had lost any sense of reason. Hanabi desperately prayed that this man would just walk away. A fight would not end in their favor. The man chuckled. And you want me to let you leave with your lives because you have no desire to fight me? What would you do if I said no? Hanabi didn't get a chance to contemplate her response as she saw Lee press the release on his weights, instantly open up 4 of the inner gates, and rush towards the man at incredible speeds that she herself was not capable of reaching. The entire process took less than quarter of a second. His incredibly strong kick created a pressurized airwave that ended up knocking down more trees than she cared to count. But he still only hit air. Hanabi had her Byakugan on and was still not able to completely catch the motion. It was one of those rare moments she wished she had the Sharingan and its ability to perfectly catch, predict, and memorize motion rather than the distance, depth and range of vision that the Byakugan provided. Although, if she thought about it a second time, perhaps it was better that she couldn't see how outclassed she was. I suppose you answered my question, the man said in an amused tone, but your answer is quite foolish. It is especially foolish considering that I usually only attack those who attack me first. The man had somehow managed to outflank Lee and had gotten behind the kick. The man grabbed the back of Lee's neck and held him in the air. Lee screamed in pain and then stopped struggling altogether before he was tossed to the side. Lee didn't twitch. Something snapped in her as she saw her second teammate go down. Hanabi had already one teammate die today and the dam she placed over her raging emotions burst. Without any regard for her own life, she charged at the man with a wild scream, unconsciously activating the Gentle Fist Twin Lion Fists and her personal invention Gentle Fist Twin Lion Feet as she ran. Arms and feet blazing with blue chakra, she jumped into the air and went for a kick with her left foot. The man ducked. She landed and twisted in one motion as if it were a dance and swung her right arm. And felt a jerk the instant she swung. Coming back to her senses, she realized that he had grabbed her palm. She didn't even know where to begin in figuring out how he grabbed her chakra-charged fist with no damage, but she reacted without even thinking. If pure chakra wasn't going to do damage, then water release. Burst whip. She swung her other arm as quickly as she could and saw it hit his face, knocking his mask off and sending him to the ground. She frowned. There was something odd about this. How did she manage to hit the man when Lee had failed even after opening 4 of the release? She shouted as she broke the genjutsu. Her Byakugan had told her that a foreign force was manipulating her chakra. The genjutsu was highly subtle, as very few things about the scene had changed. It was probably why she had taken so long to figure out she was in a genjutsu. Being a Hyuga, she usually detected and broke the genjutsu techniques before they even took effect in her mind. This time, she had taken 5 seconds to notice something wrong with her system. The situation was never good to begin with, but this made it even worse. Her enemy was already skilled in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and fuinjutsu. But he even showed enough skill in genjutsu to fool her Byakugan for a few seconds. Forget S rank. Forget master level. This man was a god. I'm impressed, the man intoned from behind her. When did he? Hanabi frantically thought she is twisted and slammed her uninjured palm forward as hard as she could. Once again she felt a jerk a millisecond after she swung. And once again, the man had grabbed her hand. This time she flowed with her still present momentum from her initial twisting and shifted her feet in that same direction to activate Kaden. Her Kaden died before it even started and the chakra surrounding her limbs began to fade. She struggled to keep her techniques active. This man appeared to have some kind of ability to negate pure chakra attacks. It would have to be another elemental attack then. He had dodged the last one, so elemental attacks must be his weakness, if it could even be called that. At the very least, he would be forced to dodge again. But given the state her hand was in, she wouldn't be able to channel wind properly. Hanabi grit her teeth. She would be hurt, but she would at least do heavy damage to the man. Wind Relaya. She began. Stop, he commanded forcefully. If you activate that technique, you will die. He crushed her hand even harder. Hanabi stopped resisting once the pain became nearly unbearable. She let the chakra in her arms and feet die out. She resorted to glaring at the man, ignoring the pain in her hand from his tight grip. She still did not understand how the man had blocked her attack so easily. The look on your face is asking, how did he stop my blow, correct? The man didn't even wait for her response. Chakra theory is quite fascinating to anyone who studies it religiously. Anything made with chakra, he recited, can be destroyed with chakra. I just dispersed your gentle fist techniques by forcing even more chakra in the reverse direction. This is quite similar to how gentle fist users repel blows from other gentle fist users. It's quite simple. There was a pause, gazed intently at her. She couldn't see his eyes through his mask, but she could feel his look on her. Well then, he inquired as he strengthened his grip. Will you beg for mercy? Will you plead for your life? Save your breath. Hurry up and just have your way with me, she spat out defiantly despite having fallen on one knee from the crushing pain in her hand. Even while completely outclassed, she would go down with pride. Hurt me, rape me, kill me, whatever you want. She spoke with gritted teeth. It felt as if all the bones in her hands were being crushed to dust. It's not like you'll get your way with a woman any way else, she taunted. I bet that's the reason why you have your face covered. Women probably run away from you, screaming their heads off. It was an immature insult and one that would do nothing to change the situation, but Hanabi couldn't think of anything else to show her defiance. She gasped as a wave of killing intent washed over her for the first time in their one-sided battle. She found herself unable to breathe or even struggle anymore. She fell to the ground as the man let her hand go. She found herself looking straight at the man as he grabbed her chin with one hand and forced her head up. Hurt you? I have already done so without even trying, the man said slowly as the killing intent continued to increase. Hanabi held back a whimper. Rape you? There was a small pause as he gazed at her. I have no desire for what your body has to offer. Do not insult me. Tell me, girl, would you sleep with an insect? Not able to control herself once again, Hanabi screamed in anger and started kicking him while attempting to pry the man's fingers off her neck with her badly injured hands. She could accept that there were stronger people than her. But she would not take insults to her pride. She was not a worthless insect. She instinctively channeled even more chakra into her eyes. She could barely move, but maybe if she wished it enough, she could burn him to death with her eyes. Perhaps she was weak, but she was not pathetic. Kill you, was it? I like that look in your eyes. It would be a waste if you died. Hanabi's vision changed for a second and she thought she could see red eyes behind the mask. Then she saw black. Contrary to what people thought, Hiyashi Hyuga was not a greedy man. He was stoic and strict, perhaps, but not evil. Hiyashi merely looked out for the best interests of his family and clan. He never once took action for personal gain. However, even the most unselfish person could not ignore the opportunity that the Hokage offered the previous night. Hiyashi looked around the room and tuned out the debate between the Kurama and the Kohaku clan heads over water regulations. Normally, he would have been paying full attention to what was being said, but today Hiyashi was only concerned with the final proposal for the day. His eyes swept the room and landed on one blonde boy at the other side of the room. Hiyashi allowed himself a tiny smile as he reflected upon his time with the fourth. The years had gone by all too quickly. Instead of looking forward to the wedding of the Yellow Flash, he was now looking forward to the wedding of the Yellow Flash's son. The Hokage had summoned and informed him that the Land of Spring and the Demon Country both requested a political marriage involving Naruto Uzumaki. Uzumaki himself would remain a Konoha ninja, but at least one of the heirs would have to return to the mother's country. Hiashi frowned at the thought of Uzumaki's children potentially living in another country. No matter how peaceful the world was right now, one simply did not freely hand a power like the Uzumaki bloodline to another country. It was already bad enough that there were wandering Uzumaki clan members out in the world. The Hokage himself seemed to agree. The only way, however, to stop such political marriages without offending, and potentially starting a war with, the other countries was a domestic marriage. Hiashi had many times considered forcefully encouraging or perhaps even ordering his firstborn to aggressively pursue the young man, in hopes that the oblivious boy would finally return her affections. Hiashi mentally groaned as he thought about his daughter's 15-year crush. Not only was Hinata weak, she couldn't even love a boy properly and gain his affections. He shook his head. Even though Uzumaki had not responded, fortunately, that crush, affection, love, or whatever Hinata had impressed the sixth enough to come up with a proposal that would all but cement the Hyuga's standing as the strongest clan in the village. The Hyuga, of course, would have to pay a price. But the cost was nothing compared to the gains of having some measure of influence on the future Hokage. Hiashi would never use the influence for immoral purposes, of course. He merely wanted to contribute a bit more in how the village was run so that the Hyuga clan would not have to pick up the slack as it did so often. The Hyuga clan had taken the most number of casualties among the clans because they had to cover the backs of everyone else. That could have been avoided if the Hokage had been persuaded to make the academy more rigorous, for example. No matter what people said about him, Hiashi was a patriot. The entire Hyuga clan was patriotic to the village. They had sworn their loyalty all those years ago when they first joined the village, and they were honor-bound to protect the village to the best of their abilities. Hiashi had a duty as clan head to be as ambitious as possible to honor that agreement. Of course, the prestige gained from being the father-in-law the Hokage was a decent bonus, but that was not his primary reason why he was pushing for a marriage between his first daughter and Uzumaki. Hiashi wanted to ensure peace within the village. What better way to do it than to lend his wisdom to a Hokage son-in-law? Hiashi looked up when he saw the sixth bring up the last proposal for the day. Now that all the issues were taken care of, drawled the silver-haired Hokage in a very slow voice. Hiashi resisted the urge to twitch in annoyance. The man was purposely drawing this out to annoy him. There's one final proposal that was not put on the list. Lord Nara, if you will. Hiashi turned to look at the speaker. It had been Shikaku's son. The young man had just recently taken the position as clan heir from his mother after his own political wedding with the Suna princess 2 years ago. It was what cemented the permanent alliance between Konoha and Suna. There were even talks about uniting the two villages completely. You want me to explain it? What a drag. It was only his Hyuga upbringing that was able to stop him from rolling his eyes at the comment. The lazy Nara thought everything was troublesome. Well, alright, Shikamaru Nara stated in a bored voice, this only came in yesterday but was so urgent that we had to rush it into today's meeting. We have a couple countries requesting a political marriage. Political marriage? With whom? The Yamanaka regent asked. It was the wife of one of his old classmates, Kunoichi Yamanaka. After his untimely death in the war, she had taken up the mantle while preparing her daughter for her eventual rise to the clan head position. The black-haired clan head merely pointed his finger towards the youngest member of the chamber. What? Me? Uzumaki gaped. Why wasn't I the first person to be notified? You bastard. I bet this is for the time I painted all your dear orange. There was a small pause as snickers were heard around the chamber. Hiashi wanted to groan. This prankster was going to be his future son-in-law. Even if he was a strict father, he was not a cruel one. Hiyashi would normally never throw his daughter away to an uncultured brute. It was only because Hiyashi recognized that Uzumaki had much more depth and strength, both physical and political, than most people realized that he was allowing a marriage between Uzumaki and his first daughter. That was you. The Nara exclaimed. I didn't even know, although if I really think about it, there's no one else who would have used orange paint. The Nara rubbed the back of his head in irritation. Ah, Naruto, you're such a troublesome idiot. There were more chuckles around the room. In any case, we're telling you now. It's only been around 12 hours since we got the message. We figured you might appreciate a good night's rest without something like this hanging over your head. The two interested parties are the Demon Country and Land of Spring. They are all but demanding a political marriage to Priestess Shion and Daimyo Koyuki Kazuhana, respectively. It seems that they have heard of recent events. The chamber became eerily quiet as everyone was reminded of the fifth apprentice. It had been a few months now since the death of Sakura Haruno. It wasn't a minor matter when such a high-profile ninja, one who had been a candidate for the position of Hokage and on the verge of achieving S rank, unexpectedly died via assassination. When it happened, the fact that Naruto Uzumaki was a free man was not lost on anyone in the village. But now, it appeared that even the other countries had gotten the memo as well. Hiyashi saw a flash of intelligence and awareness flicker in the sage's eyes. Uzumaki's tone became uncharacteristically dangerous. I see. The sixth interrupted before anything could happen. Let's calm down now. We all understand how you feel, but we still have to follow protocol. Uzumaki had matured a great deal and had finally developed some control of his emotions, but the loss of a loved one wasn't easy for anyone to deal with. Uzumaki, for all his talents and skills, was still quite the emotional boy. It was obvious to everyone present that he still had not gotten over the death of Sakura Haruno. The sixth motioned for the Nara to continue. Lord Uzumaki, Nara said in a formal voice that sounded rather bored, do you agree to accept either of these offers? No, came the curt response. The tone was still dangerous and Hiyashi felt himself shiver slightly. There was no killing intent in the air, but the young man, despite his still somewhat brash attitude, was still able to command such a presence. It was extremely fortunate that he had such dedication and loyalty to Konoha. Otherwise, the village might have been torn apart many times before when the villager had mistreated Uzumaki when he was younger. The sixth chose this time to enter the conversation again. Naruto, he said, breaking all rules of conduct by being informal, wars have been started for less. You can't just flatly refuse requests from leaders of their respective countries. Even if you refuse these two, we've heard rumors that the daimyo from the Land of Birds is also considering to send a request for political marriage with you as well. Something like this is going to be a regular occurrence for you if you don't find someone soon. There was a long pause. They can all go to hell. I still refuse and will refuse them all. I'm only going to marry someone I love or intend to love. Hiyashi looked around and met the eyes of some of the other clan heads. While it was likely that they were now all trying to get one of their clan members to marry Uzumaki, they had to cooperate to even get to that point. Lord Uzumaki, may we ask why? Your late teammate and girlfriend is no longer alive and you yourself have expressed an interest to revive your clan. So shouldn't you have been emotionally prepared for something like this? Shibi Aburame asked in polite tone. Indeed, Lord Uzumaki, Reina Hagoromo said in the characteristic melodious voice of the Hagoromo clan who used angelic songs to put their enemies in a genjutsu. I am not personally familiar with you, but your greatest ability, according to the late Lord Jiraiya, is your capacity to accept and love others. Can you find it in your heart to accept someone else in your life? Uzumaki shook his head sadly. Accept. Yes. Love. I'm not too sure. My heart itself is not something that can just be given away so freely. I thought that you might say that. However, the Hokage paused, we must give a valid response. Otherwise, we'd risk offending them. War might not happen now, but anger from such offenses lingers until a valid enough excuse for war comes around. If you want to protect those in the village you love so much, then you don't have a lot of choices. In fact, there's only one option if you want to avoid these political marriages. Uzumaki's expression became hard once again. I see. You're forcing me into an arranged marriage with a girl from a prominent clan or family at home then. Hiyashi couldn't help but be slightly surprised at the boy's sharp mind. Perhaps he wasn't talented at memorizing rules and history, but Uzumaki was definitely quick on the uptake in surprising situations. Yes, Uzumaki wasn't the ideal son-in-law, but Hiyashi knew he could do a lot worse than the golden son of Konoha. Hiyashi knew that the rest of the elders and his own father, the Grand Elder, hated Uzumaki with a passion because of his lack of respect for tradition, but Hiyashi was sure he could convince them by playing the "a Hyuga will be the wife of the future Hokage" card. They were not so shallow as to let their hatred for a boy make them overlook the potential benefits of being a clan directly associated with the Hokage and his family. And also, Hiyashi thought darkly, none of them care enough about Hinata to stop her from marrying someone they hate. Nara let out a loud sigh. Look, Naruto, you're one of my best friends and I really feel for you. But there's not much we can do. Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri withdrew from the Grand Ninja Alliance fairly early after the war, and since then we've been trying to keep the fragile peace in the world. We cannot make enemies out of two friendly nations, especially ones that are quite wealthy, by saying you just don't want to marry their leaders. The only valid excuse would be if you were already engaged and married to someone here. Look at it this way, if you choose someone here, at the very least, Konoha and the involved clan can be flexible and give you a lot more time to sort out your feeling with regards to Sakura. So while you might have to marry as soon as possible, you won't be pressured to father an heir any time soon. The Hokage added, furthermore, the girls at home already know you and may love you for who you are. Hiyashi knew that that was his cue to jump him. Lord Uzumaki, my firstborn daughter, Hinata, has been rather enamored with you. To be honest, she has had you in her heart for 15 years. I can assure you that she, above all else, loves you for who you are. Hiyashi ignored the envious murmurs of the other clan heads and civilian counselors around him and carefully studied the young man as his expression softened. Hiyashi could notice the warring feelings playing out in Uzumaki's heart. It was clear Uzumaki did not love Hinata, but the sage also felt that he owed Hinata a debt. Hiyashi had initially berated his daughter, out of love, of course, for rushing in without thinking to save Uzumaki's life during the Akatsuki leader's attack and using her own body to shield him in the last war, which led to Neji's death, but her foolhardy actions were about to pay dividends here. Sensing the loosening of the tension in the room, the Yamanaka regent, Inoichi's wife, joined in. My daughter has been your classmate when both of you were in the academy and has been on friendly terms with you for a long time. If you were to choose her, she could definitely give you all the time you need. After all, she herself is rather heartbroken about Sakura. Perhaps the two of you may become close because of your close bonds with a mutual friend. Hiyashi carefully waited as the other clan heads took their turns in offering girls to the young clan head. To be honest, the practice was distasteful and it sounded as if they were trying to sell cattle, but unfortunately, political marriages were often what kept people alive. Sounding like bartering idiots and objectifying their daughters were small prices to pay for either peace or power or both. While he himself would not deny that a political marriage with the future Hokage was beneficial to the Hyuga clan, his daughter at least genuinely loved the young Uzumaki. Unlike others, he could at least convince himself that he was acting as a caring father on behalf of his daughter. I refuse. The blonde crossed his arms and closed his eyes. I tried to convince myself to do this, but I can't just give away my heart like that. If all of you don't like that, then you can all just kiss my Naruto, Hatake said with a touch of irritation in his voice at the vulgar statement. Let me list out a bunch of reasons why this would be good for you. If you marry a girl from a prominent clan, You have greater influence in the council. Hiyashi could see that Uzumaki was about to speak up, but Hitaki continued on. You might not care about what the council thinks, but having more influence on this council would help in your attempt to become a good Hokage. This is not a military dictatorship where the Hokage makes all the rules. You can't just pass proposals unilaterally, you need the support of those you rule over. Being connected with one of the other noble clans would help you immensely. Don't care, came the short response. The Hokage groaned. Look, if you need more convincing, think of this. Your fan club will lose a ton of members once women see you're off the market for good. There were some snickers at that last sentence. It was no secret that Uzumaki was popular among the girls in Konoha. It was rather entertaining to see dozens of clones running away from rabid fangirls from time to time when the clan head was not away on missions. Hiyashi saw his chance when he saw the boy's resolve crumble even more. Hiyashi cleared his throat as he pulled out his trump card. Might I point out that the Hyuga clan has its own ramen chef and a copy of the Ichiraku's recipe for their miso ramen. We could offer you free ramen whenever you visit. Hiyashi smirked as he saw Uzumaki's eyes widen slightly. He had to hand it to the Hokage. The sixth really did know his student well. It had been the Hokage's idea for the Hyuga clan to buy the recipes for the boy's favorite ramen. The recipes cost a lot more than expected, especially since he demanded exclusive access, but the loss of money was trivial should Uzumaki become his son-in-law. There was dead silence for about 10 seconds. Then all hell broke loose as the other clan heads and counselors, minus the grumbling Nara, claimed that they too had excellent ramen chefs. Hiyashi looked on with amusement as Shuza Akamichi claimed that his Akamichi chefs made even better ramen than Ichiraku's, and the Unkai Karama claiming that they could even make vegetables taste like ramen with their genjutsu. Surprisingly, the Toad Sage remained quiet for a long time and seemed to ignore everyone else. His eyes bore into Hiyashi. Hiyashi, Uzumaki said, not even bothering with honorifics. Before I agree to anything, let me ask you something. Are you doing this for Hinata or for your clan? Hiyashi closed his eyes and restrained himself from growling in irritation. He knew it was in the boy's nature to be informal, especially with his manners, so he decided to overlook the blatant lack of respect. In fact, the boy probably did that on purpose just to prove his point that Hiyashi was more about cold rules and less about love. Hiyashi had to be careful with his response and could not overreact. The boy, no, man was still the Toad Sage and would not be fooled by a lie or even a half-truth. Hiyashi decided to speak the full honest truth. Sometimes, in those fortunate rare cases, the desires of a father and the duties of a clan head are aligned. I will admit that this is one such case. I see. Uzumaki nodded sagely. Hiyashi merely hoped that his sincere response would be enough to satisfy the young man. I'm curious to see which of those aspects comes out on top. Because I don't want to marry Hinata. Naruto. Nara shouted in an exasperated tone before anyone else could eagerly advertise his or her own daughter or niece again. She loved you for years. Why can't you even give her a chance? Don't you remember what it was like when Sakura kept rejecting you? You're doing the same thing with Hinata. She almost died for you twice. Hiyashi took note of the fact that Uzumaki was still looking at him. He prided himself for being a master at reading people and knew that Uzumaki's response hadn't been a simple rejection. Naruto. The sixth admonished before trying to carry out his end of the deal. The sixth Hokage had promised to do his best to swing Uzumaki's favor towards Hinata for the Hyuga clan's support in future proposals. Think about what Hinata's done for you over the years. Don't be so Kakashi-sensei. Uzumaki cut him off. Hiyashi was beginning to feel unnerved by those blue eyes but continued to match the sage's gaze. Shut up. The silence was deafening. Almost everyone in the room was gaping at the young clan head. One did not simply insult the Hokage like that. Naruto, the Hokage growled. Hiyashi, I don't want Hinata as my wife. Uzumaki repeated, ignoring the Hokage. Hiyashi nodded. There was something more here. Perhaps a deal. You have said that already. And Hiyashi suddenly had a foreboding feeling. I want Hanabi. Yamanaka Flower Shop. Konoha, March 16, AK-22. Mom, Ino said after returning home from a walk around the marketplace. Yes, dear, what is it? Ino paused to carefully word her next words. Is Naruto getting married? Her mom froze. Ino dear, where did you hear that? Ino mentally frowned. Based on her mother's actions, there was something to the rumors that she had been hearing all morning. I heard rumors from the villagers. Something about how the General Assembly yesterday forced him to marry a girl because he was the last of his clan. Everyone's been talking about it. Her mother relaxed. Well, you know that the details of the General Assembly are classified. Even if you're my daughter, I can't give away details like that. Her mother gave her a sad look. No matter how much I might want to, she added. But everyone knows that information from the General Assembly is leaked out to the public by the civilian representatives. You can't just tell me that it's classified when half the village already knows something is going on. Well, Ino, her mom said with a chuckle. Yesterday's meeting in particular was special. The civilians only know the surface story, but the ninjas carried a secret conversation yesterday. Just tell me if he's getting married or not. That's a secret, dear, her mom smiled. Mom, you know I can keep a secret. I'm not the department head of the communications department for no reason. Her mother laughed. Well, that's because you're good at communicating. Secrets require not telling other people. There was a knowing look in her eyes, as in not communicating. Ino groaned. When will people ever get over that? I'm not a gossip. I haven't gossiped in years. Keep telling yourself that, honey, and you might actually believe it. You're so hard to deal with. How difficult is it to just say yes or no? Look, Ino, her mother sighed. If Naruto is getting married, then you'll eventually find out. Why is it so important that you find out now? Because I want to know now, Ino fired back. And that's what makes you a gossip, Ino. I can't believe my own mother is insulting me, Ino said in exasperation. I want to know now so I can do something about it. Her mother laughed. It's not something you have control over, Ino. And besides, from what I can tell you, nothing is confirmed yet. Ino looked at her mother hopefully. So those rumors are just rumors. Ino and her mother both turned their heads to the door. Oh, Shikamaru, what brings you here today? Flowers for Tamari. Ino snorted. As if he has it in him to do that. He'll just call it troublesome or something. Because it is troublesome. It's annoying carrying around those things all over town. People keep asking who the lucky, or in some cases, unlucky, lady is, and it takes at least an hour longer to get back home. Ino scowled. Yes, exactly. An hour of your time declaring your love for your life in public is such torture. I can't believe that she even agreed to get married to you. The shadow user just yawned. In any case, I'm here because Ino gave me a call earlier and told me she wanted to see me. I'm guessing it's about the same question she asked me, her mother laughed. Ino wants to know if her love interest is getting married. Mom, Ino screamed with embarrassment. I do not like Naruto in that way. He's cute and he's an old friend, but he belongs to. Ino quickly shut her mouth at that point. She was moments away from revealing that Sakura was alive. Fortunately, however, her mother took the somber expression on her face as sadness and reminiscing. Ino, she said gently, Sakura is dead. The faster you come to realize that, the better off you'll be. I know you're heartbroken over losing your best friend, but you can't keep living in the past. Ino nodded, not looking at Shikamaru, who was undoubtedly giving her a hard look. Yeah, but, Ino began. In any case, Shikamaru interrupted, I can't reveal anything about last night's meeting either. If your mother wouldn't, why would I? Ino, sometimes it's just better for you not to know things until the proper time. Ino turned to glare at him. Well, excuse me for wanting to know if my friend is getting forced to make a decision he doesn't want. I'm just looking out for his best interests. I even heard you were a big part of doing this to Naruto. You should know better. With that, she stomped out of the flower shop. Damn them. Damn both her mother and Shikamaru. She didn't know what to believe. Usually the rumors had some grains of truth in them, except Ino couldn't see Naruto agreeing to get married. He wouldn't betray